It's amazing how quickly your life can implode over a single phone call. One moment you're adjusting your veil, and the next, everything you've planned for months comes crashing down around you. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking as I reread the message from our wedding planner. 3 hours before my wedding, and she'd canceled. Just like that. No explanation, no apology, just a brief text saying she couldn't make it. This can't be happening, I whispered, my voice barely audible in the bridal suite. The champagne glasses clinked mockingly behind me as my sister Kelly rushed around, trying to coordinate with the venue staff. "Samantha, breathe," Kelly said, gripping my shoulders. "We can figure this out. David's family has connections." "No," I cut her off sharply. "I don't want to involve them, especially not Maggie." The mention of my soon-to-be mother-in-law made my stomach turn. Something about this felt wrong. The timing was too perfect, too calculated. My phone buzzed again. This time it was David. "Mom's offering to help. She knows someone who can step in." Of course she did. I'd seen enough of Maggie's helpful interventions over the past year to recognize her handiwork. The caterer who suddenly doubled their prices, the florist who mysteriously lost our order, the venue that almost canceled due to a scheduling conflict. Each time, Maggie swooped in with her own preferred vendor, her own vision of what our wedding should be. "Tell your mother thanks, but we've got it handled," I typed back, even though we definitely didn't. The door burst open, and Sophia, our mutual friend, rushed in. I just ran into Maggie in the hallway. She's already calling someone named Patricia to take over the planning. My fingers curled into fists, crushing the delicate lace of my dress. Did she seem surprised about our planner canceling? Sophia hesitated, and that pause told me everything I needed to know. "She was smiling, wasn't she?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Like she just won something," Sophia admitted quietly. Kelly swore under her breath. "That manipulative—" "Ladies!" A smooth voice interrupted from the doorway. Maggie stood there, perfect in her designer suit, not a hair out of place. "I've taken care of everything. Patricia will be here in 20 minutes. She's much more suitable for a Mitchell family wedding." The way she emphasized suitable made my skin crawl. I caught her subtle glance at my dress, the one I'd chosen instead of her recommended designer. "How fortunate that Patricia was available on such short notice," I said, meeting her gaze, almost like she was waiting for the call. Something flickered in Maggie's eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or challenge. "Providence smiles on those who plan ahead, dear. Or those who orchestrate disasters," I muttered after she left. Kelly grabbed my arm. "Sam, you don't think she actually convinced our wedding planner to bail last minute? Created chaos so she could swoop in and take control?" I laughed bitterly. It's exactly what she'd do. I walked to the window, watching guests arrive in their expensive cars. Below, I could see David greeting people, handsome in his tuxedo, completely unaware of his mother's machinations. "What are you going to do?" Sophia asked. I touched the window, leaving a small smudge on the perfect glass. "For now, I'm going to marry David, but after that," I turned to face them, something hard and cold settling in my chest. "I'm going to make sure Maggie regrets every single game she's played with my life." "Sam," Kelly's voice held a warning. "No," I said firmly. "I'm done being the bigger person. She wants to play games? Fine. But she's about to learn that this veterinarian from the wrong side of town knows exactly how to deal with snakes." The mirror reflected my image: white dress, perfect makeup, and eyes that had lost their last trace of innocence. In 3 hours, I'd be a Mitchell. And then the real game would begin. Patricia's heels clicked against the marble floor like a metronome counting down to disaster. The reception hall buzzed with whispered conversations and judgmental glances. My wedding had become exactly what I'd fought against: a Mitchell Society spectacle. The ice sculpture should be centered, Maggie commanded, waving her hand dismissively at the staff. And those flowers are completely wrong. Patricia, didn't we discuss burgundy roses? The bride specifically requested wildflowers, Patricia replied, her voice wavering. I stood in the doorway, still in my wedding dress, watching my carefully planned celebration transform into Maggie's vision. David appeared beside me, his hand finding mine. It looks different, he said carefully. It looks like your mother's annual charity gala, I replied, keeping my voice low, complete with her usual crowd of social climbers. As if on cue, I spotted several unfamiliar faces among our guests, Maggie's friends who definitely hadn't been on our invitation list. I'll talk to her, David promised, but I grabbed his arm. Don't. It's what she wants, to create drama between us on our wedding day. A commotion near the cake table drew our attention. Kelly was arguing with Patricia, her hands gesturing at the elaborate five-tier monstrosity that had replaced our original choice. That's not the cake they ordered, Kelly insisted. Show me the contract. Patricia's eyes darted to Maggie, who swooped in like a perfectly coiffed vulture. There was a tragic mishap with the original baker. Fortunately, I know the most extraordinary pâtissier. Tragic mishap? I interrupted, stepping forward. What exactly happened to our cake, Maggie? The room grew quieter, guests pretending not to eavesdrop while hanging on every word. Oh, darling. Maggie's smile was razor sharp. You really should be mingling with your guests instead of worrying about such details. Although, her gaze swept over the crowd, I noticed several of your invited guests couldn't make it. How unfortunate. My stomach clenched. I'd noticed the same thing. Several of my friends and colleagues had canceled last minute, citing various emergencies. Samantha, a gravelly voice cut through the tension. Evelyn Mitchell stood nearby, elegant in her vintage Chanel, watching the scene with shrewd eyes. Come sit with me for a moment. I followed David's grandmother to a quiet corner, aware of Maggie's gaze burning into my back. Your mother-in-law, Evelyn said, adjusting her pearl necklace, has always believed control equals love. She planned David's entire life before he could walk, when he defied her by choosing you. She paused, studying my face. Well, let's just say she's not used to losing. I'm not something to win or lose, I said through gritted teeth. No, you're not. Evelyn's eyes glittered. You're something far more dangerous. You're change. And Maggie fears change more than anything. Before I could respond, Tom appeared, his face tight with concern. Sam, got a minute? There's something you need to see. He led me to a service corridor, pulling out his phone. I overheard Patricia on the phone earlier. Look at these texts. The messages showed a conversation between Patricia and Maggie from weeks ago, planning today's takeover in detail. Every emergency had been orchestrated, every replacement vendor prearranged. She's been planning this for months, Tom said quietly. I handed the phone back, my hands steady despite the rage building inside me. Thank you, Tom. This is helpful. Sam? He hesitated. What are you going to do? I watched David across the room, laughing with his father, blissfully unaware of his mother's machinations. Right now, I'm going to smile, dance with my husband, and play the grateful daughter-in-law. And later, I said, smoothing my dress, I'm going to learn everything there is to know about Maggie Mitchell. Every secret, every weakness, every skeleton in her designer closet. Because this isn't just about my wedding anymore. It's about making sure she never tries to control anyone's life again. Tom's expression shifted from concern to determination. Whatever you need, I'm in. I returned to the reception. accepting congratulations and pretending not to notice how Maggie had rearranged the seating to separate me from my family. But with each fake smile and polite nod, I was taking mental notes, gathering ammunition. The game had changed. Maggie thought she was teaching me a lesson about power and control. Instead, she was teaching me exactly how to destroy her. The email arrived during surgery. I was elbow deep in a German shepherd's abdomen when my phone buzzed repeatedly on the counter. Only after I'd closed up and sent the dog to recovery did I check the messages. Did you see what she posted? Kelly's text read, followed by several screenshots. There it was, on Maggie's social media. A carefully crafted post about her concerns for David's well-being, subtly highlighting my working-class background and suggesting I was taking advantage of the Mitchell family's generosity. She'd even dredged up an old photo of me from college, looking decidedly unglamorous at a protest rally. Your wife seems to have quite the colorful past, read one comment from her society friends. Money can't buy class, wrote another. Tom appeared in my office doorway as I scrolled through the comments. Those society vultures are having a field day with this. She's trying to paint me as a gold digger, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. But that's not even the worst part. I showed him the email that had triggered Kelly's warning. It was from the veterinary board announcing a surprise audit of my practice. The sender's address belonged to one of Maggie's closest friends. She's going after my career now. The words tasted bitter. This isn't just about social standing anymore. Sam, Tom hesitated. There's something else you should know. I overheard David on the phone earlier. Maggie's been pressuring him about the prenup, suggesting he add new conditions. The room seemed to tilt slightly. We already signed the prenup. She can't. She's claiming new evidence of financial misconduct on your part. A knock interrupted us. David stood in the doorway, his expression troubled. Can we talk? Tom squeezed my shoulder as he left, closing the door behind him. Your mother's busy today, I said before David could speak. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I usually found endearing. Sam, she's just worried about… About what? That I'll steal the family silver? Or maybe she's worried I'll expose how she's been manipulating everyone around her for years? It's not that simple. He pulled out his phone, showing me another post, this one from an anonymous account, detailing past Mitchell family scandals. Someone's been digging into our family history. Mom thinks it's you. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Of course she does, because heaven forbid anyone else have dirt on the mighty Mitchell family. Is it you? The question hung between us like a blade. No, I said quietly, but I'm starting to wish it was. Before he could respond, Evelyn appeared in the doorway, elegant as always, but with an urgency in her movements. David, your father needs you at the office, immediately. Her tone left no room for argument. After he left, Evelyn closed the door and turned to me. Maggie's playing a dangerous game, but she's not as clever as she thinks. Did you know she tried this same routine with Richard's first fiancé? I hadn't known Richard had been engaged before Maggie. What happened? The girl left, couldn't handle the pressure. Evelyn's eyes glittered. But you're made of stronger stuff, aren't you? She pulled an envelope from her purse. These are copies of some interesting documents about Maggie's past, including how she really joined the Mitchell family. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The contents made my eyes widen. Why are you showing me this? Because, Evelyn said, her voice steel wrapped in silk. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to prove you can hit harder. The question is, are you willing to throw the punch? I stared at the documents, thinking of the audit, the social media attacks, the prenup manipulation, each move designed to isolate and discredit me. Yes, I said finally. I am. Evelyn smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Good, because Maggie's not going to stop until someone makes her. Just remember, in this family, nothing is ever quite what it seems. She left me alone with the documents, their revelations burning in my hands like hot coals. I had what I needed to destroy Maggie's carefully constructed image, but as I read deeper, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played by forces I didn't fully understand. The question was, whose game was I really playing? The Mitchell family's annual charity gala loomed ahead, all gleaming marble and crystal chandeliers. I adjusted my borrowed designer dress, feeling like an imposter despite the perfect fit. The documents Evelyn had given me burned in my clutch, waiting for the right moment. Ready? David squeezed my hand as we approached the entrance. I nodded, noticing how he unconsciously straightened his tie. Another nervous tell. He knew something was wrong, but couldn't quite piece it together. Inside, Maggie held court near the champagne fountain, her laugh carrying across the room with practiced precision. Her eyes found mine, and her smile sharpened. "Darling," she called out, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I was just telling everyone about your wonderful work with animals. So, noble." The way she said noble made it sound like a character flaw. "Speaking of noble causes," I replied, matching her volume, "I heard the most fascinating story about your early days with the Mitchell Family Foundation." Her champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. Tom appeared at my elbow, right on cue. "Samantha, could I borrow you for a moment? There's someone you should meet." He led me to a corner where Kelly waited with an elderly man I didn't recognize. His face was familiar somehow, but I couldn't place it. "This is Harold Bennett," Kelly said quietly. "He used to work for the Mitchell Foundation." The old man's eyes were sharp despite his frail appearance. "You're the one asking questions about Margaret Mitchell." "I'm interested in the truth," I said carefully. "Truth?" He gave a bitter laugh. "That woman wouldn't know truth if it bit her. I was there when she orchestrated the takeover of the foundation from Richard's first wife, destroyed that poor woman's reputation completely." My hand tightened on my clutch. "What exactly did she do?" Before he could answer, Evelyn appeared, looking alarmed. "Samantha, dear, we need to talk. Now." She practically dragged me into an empty study, closing the door firmly. "You need to be very careful about what you do next." Why? Because I'm getting too close to the truth about Maggie? Because you're not seeing the whole picture. Evelyn's usual poise cracked slightly. "Those documents I gave you, they're not just about Maggie. They could destroy this entire family." A knock interrupted us. David entered, his face uncharacteristically stern. "I just got an interesting call from the bank. Someone's been accessing old foundation records using my credentials." My stomach dropped. I hadn't been careful enough covering my tracks. "That would be me," Evelyn said smoothly. "I asked Samantha to help me investigate some discrepancies." David's expression darkened. "Does this have anything to do with the anonymous posts about our family?" "What posts?" I asked, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. He pulled out his phone, showing us a fresh social media post, one I hadn't seen before. It detailed exactly how Maggie had manipulated her way into the Mitchell family, including documents I recognized from my own research, but I hadn't posted them. "This isn't me," I said, looking at Evelyn. Her face gave nothing away. The door opened again. Maggie stood there, Richard beside her looking grave. "No," she said. "It wasn't you. It was me." The room went silent. "I've been posting my own secrets," Maggie continued, "because someone's been threatening to expose much worse ones. And now I know who." Her gaze fixed on Evelyn, who merely smiled. "You always were clever, Margaret," Evelyn said, "but not quite clever enough." I looked between them, suddenly feeling like a pawn in a much larger game. The documents in my clutch weren't ammunition, they were bait, and I'd taken it completely. What's really going on here? David demanded. Ask your grandmother, Maggie said bitterly. Ask her about the real reason she brought Samantha into this fight. Evelyn's smile never wavered, but her eyes were cold. Sometimes, dear, the best way to destroy an enemy is to give them exactly what they want. I felt David tense beside me as the truth began to dawn. I wasn't fighting Maggie's manipulation. I was caught in the crossfire of a decades-old war between two masters of deception, and I had no idea whose side I should be on. The Mitchell Foundation's quarterly board meeting wasn't meant to be a battlefield, but I could taste the tension in the air as I took my seat beside David. Maggie sat across from us, perfectly composed despite the whispers circulating about her latest social media scandal. Evelyn presided at the head of the table, her presence somehow both reassuring and threatening. Before we begin, Richard said, shuffling through papers, there's the matter of unauthorized access to Foundation records. My fingers tightened around my pen. Beside me, David's breathing changed slightly. Fascinating timing, Maggie said, her voice silk over steel, especially given the recent articles about our family's history. Perhaps we should discuss the Foundation's original mission, Evelyn interrupted smoothly. Back when Catherine Mitchell was chair, the room went still. Catherine, Richard's first wife, the woman Maggie had replaced. I watched Maggie's face, catching the slight twitch in her jaw. Ancient history, Maggie dismissed, but her knuckles were white around her water glass. Not entirely. I pulled out my tablet, heart pounding. I've been reviewing the original charter. There are some interesting discrepancies between then and now. Samantha, David warned quietly, but I continued. For instance, the educational outreach program Catherine started. It was quite successful until it was suddenly discontinued in 1992. I met Maggie's eyes. The same year you joined the board. Those programs were inefficient, Maggie snapped. They were helping working-class students attend college, I countered. Students like me. Evelyn's smile grew sharper. Perhaps we should put it to a vote, reinstating some of Catherine's original initiatives. Absolutely not. Maggie stood, her chair scraping back. This is ridiculous. We all know what's happening here. Your new daughter-in-law is trying to... To what? I interrupted, standing as well. Expose how you've twisted this foundation to serve your social climbing, or how you used it to destroy Catherine's reputation when she started asking questions about missing funds. The words hung in the air like smoke. I hadn't meant to reveal that piece yet, but Maggie's face told me I'd hit home. You have no idea what you're talking about, she hissed. Show them the documents, Samantha, Evelyn commanded softly. My tablet shook slightly as I pulled up the files. Financial records from 1992, specifically transfers to offshore accounts under the name M. Reynolds, your maiden name, Maggie. Richard's face had gone pale. Margaret, it's not what you think, Maggie said quickly. I was protecting us. Catherine was going to expose that you were embezzling, I suggested, that the entire Mitchell fortune was built on fraud, Maggie shouted. The silence that followed was deafening. Well, Evelyn said into the quiet, that's not quite how I planned this revelation. David stood slowly. Grandmother, what exactly is going on? Ask your father, she replied. He's known all along, haven't you, Richard? I looked between them all, Maggie's desperate face, Richard's guilt, Evelyn's calculated calm, and David's growing horror. This wasn't just about Maggie anymore. The entire foundation, the Mitchell legacy, was built on lies. The vote stands, Evelyn declared. We'll decide today whether to reinstate Catherine's programs and review all financial decisions made since 1992. You can't, Maggie whispered. Actually, with Samantha's proxy vote from the shares David gave her as a wedding gift, we can. I felt David stiffen beside me. We both knew he hadn't given me any shares. I never, he began. Check your papers, dear. Evelyn smiled. You'd be surprised what you've signed recently. The realization hit me like ice water. I wasn't just a pawn in their game. I was the weapon they'd both been waiting to use. Maggie had tried to destroy me to protect her secrets, while Evelyn had cultivated me to expose them. And now I had to choose, follow through with the vote and potentially destroy the family I'd married into, or back down and let decades of corruption continue. David's hand found mine under the table, squeezing once, but I couldn't tell if it was in support or warning. The board members waited, pens poised over their voting cards, while I stood at the crossroads between justice and destruction. The vote, Evelyn prompted, begins now. The Mitchell Summer Gala sparkled with false perfection, like a diamond made of glass. I watched from the terrace as David paced near the fountain, phone pressed to his ear, his gestures growing more agitated with each passing moment. The press is already here, Kelly whispered, appearing at my elbow. Maggie's people are trying to control the narrative, but the truth has a way of slipping through. Evelyn finished, joining us with 2 champagne flutes. She offered me one with a knowing smile. Especially when it's carefully guided. The documents I'd planned to reveal tonight felt heavy in my clutch, but something about Evelyn's confidence made me uneasy. You never told me how you got these records, I said carefully. Didn't I? Her eyes glittered. Perhaps you should ask Catherine. My glass nearly slipped from my fingers. Catherine is dead. Is she? Evelyn's smile widened as she gestured toward the arriving guests. A woman in her 60s stepped out of a black car, her presence causing an immediate stir. Maggie across the garden went absolutely still. You planned this, I realized, watching the color drain from Maggie's face. All of it. Of course I did. Evelyn sipped her champagne, and you played your part beautifully. David was walking toward us now, his expression dark. The board members are all here, and they've seen the news. What news? I pulled out my phone, finding dozens of missed notifications. The headlines hit like physical blows. Mitchell Foundation fraud exposed. Decades of financial misconduct. Whistleblower reveals family corruption. But I hadn't leaked anything yet. You didn't really think I'd leave this to chance, did you? Evelyn asked softly. The documents I gave you were copies. The originals went to the press an hour ago. The garden spun slightly. You used me. We all used each other, Catherine said, joining our group. Her voice was stronger than I'd expected. Maggie used you to protect her position. Evelyn used you to destroy it. And you? She smiled sadly. You used them both for revenge. Sam. David's voice cracked slightly. Did you know about this? Before I could answer, Maggie stormed over, her perfect composure finally shattered. You vindictive little... Careful, Margaret, Evelyn cut in. The press is watching. The press? Maggie laughed, the sound brittle. You've destroyed everything. The foundation, the family name. You did that, I snapped, when you stole it from Catherine. I protected this family. Maggie's voice rose. Everything I did was to preserve what we built. What you stole, Catherine corrected quietly. And now, Evelyn added, what you've lost. Cameras flashed as reporters approached. David stepped away from me, his expression unreadable. In that moment, I realized I'd lost him too. David, I reached for him, but he pulled back. Was any of it real? He asked. Us? Or was I just part of your revenge? I loved you, I whispered. I still do. But you loved revenge more. He walked away as the reporters swarmed, their questions becoming a deafening roar. Maggie was being led inside by Richard, both their faces ashen. Catherine stood watching them, victory and sadness warring in her expression. And Evelyn? She simply smiled, raising her glass in a mock toast. Congratulations, dear, she said. You've won. But as I stood there, watching my marriage crumble and the Mitchell family implode, victory felt like ashes in my mouth. I'd wanted justice, but this felt like destruction. I'd wanted to expose the truth, but I'd become part of the lie. Kelly appeared beside me, gripping my arm. We need to go, now. As she led me through the chaos, I caught a final glimpse of David. He stood between his parents, his back straight, his shoulders bearing the weight of his family's disgrace. He didn't look back. The night air hit my face as we reached Kelly's car, and only then did I realize I was crying. What have I done? I whispered. But the only answer was the sound of camera shutters and the distant murmur of a family falling apart. A destruction I'd helped orchestrate, even if I hadn't pulled the final trigger. I'd become exactly what I'd hated, a manipulator, a destroyer, a Mitchell in all but name. And now I had nothing left to show for it but the bitter taste of a victory that felt more like defeat. 3 days after the gala, I found Maggie sitting alone in her garden, methodically cutting roses from their stems. The morning papers lay scattered around her feet, their headlines screaming about the Mitchell family's disgrace. Have you come to gloat? She didn't look up from her pruning. I came to understand. I remained standing, watching her hands shake slightly as she cut another rose. Why did you do it? All of it? You think you've won something, don't you? She finally met my eyes. Destroyed the big bad Mitchell matriarch, exposed all our dirty secrets, but you have no idea what you've really done. Then tell me. She laughed, the sound brittle as frozen grass. Did Catherine tell you why she really left? Not the sanitized version Evelyn fed you, but the truth? Before I could answer, David appeared at the garden entrance. He looked exhausted, his usual polish replaced by shadows under his eyes. The FBI is here, he said quietly. Maggie's scissors dropped to the ground. Already? They're not here for you. David's voice cracked slightly. They're here for grandmother. The world seemed to tilt sideways. What? Oh, you clever fool, Maggie whispered. You never wondered why Evelyn was so eager to help you? Why she had all those convenient documents ready? The Foundation's corruption was a cover? David stepped closer, his face hard. For something much worse, the missing money, the offshore accounts. They weren't Mom's. They were Evelyn's. But Catherine found out, Maggie finished, and Evelyn made sure she disappeared. I didn't drive Catherine away, Samantha. I helped her escape. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I sank onto a stone bench, the morning sun suddenly too bright. All these years, Maggie continued, I played the villain, let everyone think I was the controlling monster, because as long as they were watching me, they weren't watching Evelyn, I finished, bile rising in my throat. And now, thanks to your crusade for justice, the one person who could keep her in check is ruined. Maggie's smile was razor sharp. While Evelyn walks away with everything. She's already gone, isn't she? I asked David. He nodded. Left last night. The Foundation's accounts are empty. You were so focused on revenge, Maggie said softly. You never saw you were just another piece on her board. Just like I was. Just like Catherine. Where is Catherine now? Safe. Hidden. Which is more than I can say for any of us anymore. Footsteps on gravel announced the FBI agent's approach. David moved to stand between them and his mother, but Maggie waved him away. Don't, she said. Some fights you can't win. As the agents led Maggie away for questioning, I caught her final whisper. I hope your revenge was worth it. David and I stood in the ruined garden, surrounded by half-cut roses and scattered newspapers. The distance between us felt infinite. "I never wanted this," I said. "Didn't you?" His voice was tired. "You wanted to destroy my family. Congratulations. Mission accomplished." "David, the funny thing is," he continued, "Mom was trying to protect me. From Evelyn, from the truth, from all of it. And I let you tear her down because I thought I was choosing love over loyalty." He turned to leave, then paused. "But maybe they're the same thing. And maybe we both forgot that somewhere along the way." I watched him walk away, understanding finally hitting me like a physical blow. In my quest for justice, I'd become the weapon Evelyn needed. In trying to expose one manipulator, I'd played right into the hands of a worse one. The roses Maggie had been cutting lay scattered across the ground, their thorns still sharp, their petals already beginning to wilt. Like revenge, I realized, beautiful from a distance, but deadly up close, and ultimately destined to decay. I pulled out my phone and dialed Kelly's number. "I need your help," I said when she answered. "We need to find Catherine. She's the only one who knows the whole truth." And then what? I looked at the abandoned garden, at the chaos I'd helped create. Then we fix what I broke. All of it. But as police cars pulled up to the Mitchell estate, their lights painting the roses in flashes of red and blue, I wondered if anything could ever be truly fixed once it had been so thoroughly shattered. The small cafe on the outskirts of Seattle smelled like rain and coffee. Catherine sat across from me, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug, looking nothing like the polished society woman from the gala. Here, she seemed more real, more human. "Evelyn's in Singapore," I said, sliding the envelope across the table. "These are the account numbers Kelly traced." Catherine nodded, unsurprised. She always had exit strategies. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? Before I could answer, the cafe door chimed. David walked in, followed by Maggie. The sight of them together made my chest ache. They joined us silently, David's hand brushing mine as he sat down. The touch felt like forgiveness and accusation all at once. "The FBI cleared me," Maggie said quietly, "but the foundation is finished." "Good." Catherine's voice was steel. "It needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, properly this time." "With whose money?" David asked. "Mine." I pulled out another envelope. "I'm selling my clinic." The silence that followed felt heavy with possibility and pain. "Sam, no," David started, but I cut him off. "I broke this. I need to fix it." I met Maggie's eyes. "Not for revenge or justice, but because it's right. And what do you want in return?" Maggie's question carried years of distrust. "Nothing." I smiled slightly. "That's the point." Catherine reached into her bag, producing a worn leather journal. "These are the original foundation documents, the real ones, not Evelyn's versions. They outline a different kind of legacy, one about helping people, not controlling them." "Like the educational programs," I said. "Yes." Catherine opened the journal. "Programs that could help students like you, Samantha, not because they're worthy of Mitchell charity, but because everyone deserves a chance to build their own legacy." David's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. "It won't be easy," Maggie warned. "The Mitchell name is toxic now." "Then we'll use a different name," I suggested. "The Catherine Turner Foundation." Both Catherine and Maggie looked startled. "Why Turner?" Catherine asked. "Because names have power," I said, "and it's time to build something new instead of fighting over something old." David's thumb traced circles on my palm as Maggie and Catherine exchanged long looks across the table. "I'll help," Maggie said finally, "but not as a director, as an advisor only." "Agreed," Catherine nodded. "And you, David?" "I go where my wife goes." His voice was quiet but certain. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like applause or perhaps warning. We sat there, 5 people who had hurt each other in countless ways, trying to build something from the wreckage of revenge. There's one condition, I said, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Complete transparency. No more secrets, no more manipulation. We do this in the open or not at all. Even if it means facing uncomfortable truths? Maggie asked. Especially then. Catherine closed her journal with a soft thud. Then let's begin. As we left the cafe, David pulled me aside while Maggie and Catherine walked ahead, already deep in discussion about restructuring plans. You're really selling your clinic? He asked. Already sold. I watched his face carefully. Unless you think I'm making another mistake. No. He touched my cheek gently. I think you're finally making things right. We all are. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and sharp. Ahead of us, Maggie and Catherine paused, waiting. Behind us lay the ruins of what revenge had wrought. Before us stretched the harder path of reconstruction. I took David's hand and stepped forward, understanding finally that true justice isn't about destroying what's broken. It's about building something better from the pieces. But as we walked toward our waiting family, I felt the weight of Evelyn's account numbers in my pocket. Some choices, I realized, would have to wait for another day. Some forms of justice require patience rather than revenge. For now, though, we had work to do. And maybe that was enough.